I want to open with a quote from Lorg from our text, and I want to pull 4 points from this quote that I want to talk about just for a few moments. The quote, it says, "Assurance of his call gives you confidence, helps you persevere through tough times, gives you appropriate authority to lead, and is a source of humility." So, assurance of his call gives us 4 things. I want to break down those 4 things that Lorg talks about. And before I do, I want to say assurance of his call is not just limited to full-time ministry. It's not just limited to a person that's on staff at a church. God has a unique call on everybody's life. Being called, someone called to be a lead pastor isn't any more important than someone that is called to grow a thriving business. Because maybe, it's going to get to a point where your thriving business is now funding so many ministries of the church. Everybody's got a unique role to play. And so these points are for everyone, not just people working at a church. Point one that I want to break down from this quote is assurance of his call. One, gives you confidence. It's human nature to focus on our shortcomings and to think about what we can't do, what we're unable to do. But what Lorg says is, he says, instead of focusing on your shortcomings, focus on your strengths and the contribution you can make by answering God's call. Whenever you are working for the glory of the kingdom, you are blessed with such a spiritual confidence. It's not that we know everything, definitely not, but it's that you're being led by the one who does. And when you know that, you have such a confidence that, hey, as long as I'm following God, like, I'm good. He's got me. He's got a plan. He's got a will and a purpose for my life and a direction. And when we get into this area and this season, we have to be so careful with pride. I'm going to talk about that more here in a minute, because the pride of the flesh will destroy the confidence of the Spirit. Always. The pride of the flesh will destroy the confidence of the Spirit. Point two from Lord's quote. Sorry. Point two, what assurance of his call does is, point two is it helps you persevere. Ministry is not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. There are going to be times where it's rain. There's going to be times where it's rain. There's going to be times where it's struggle. Ministry has its benefits. Ministry has its fruits. But there are also really heavy burdens to carry. And there are moments where we're going to have to endure and we're going to have to struggle a little bit. And when you're operating in the call of God on your life, you're able to persevere because you know that God wouldn't have stuck you in this moment. Hey, if I'm working in the call of God, there's going to be more. There's going to be new direction. There's going to be light at the end of this tunnel, essentially, because I know that God isn't going to leave me here. Point three, assurance of his call gives you appropriate authority. And be careful. It doesn't say it gives you authority. It says it gives you appropriate authority. The authority is God's. You are just someone borrowing it. Lorg talks about this a little bit. He says God's call gives confidence because he calls us to join him in his work. Calls us to join him in his work. God is with us all the time while we are doing his work. Leaders especially need to remember this. And with the authority that God gives us, we can so easily make this about us. We can say, like, oh, well, God is with me while I'm doing my work. We see this all the time. I see this all the time. People will use Jeremiah 29:11 and they say, "For I can do all things through the Lord who gives me strength." And the all things that they are doing is not things that God is calling them to do. It's things that they want to do. And they're saying, well, God's going to give me the strength to do what I want. That's not true. God is going to give you the strength to do what he is calling you to do. It's not God helping you do your work. It's you helping God do his work. It's God's work. It's God's authority. He's just letting you share it so graciously for a brief moment. The last point, point four, assurance of his call is a source of humility. So many leaders, unfortunately, allow their church to become a source of pride. They say, look what I built. Look what I did. I had thousands of people at my service. Even people that aren't in full-time ministry, we can get to a point where we say, I led 4 or 5 people to the Lord this week. But when we partner with God to build something, we cannot afford to let that become a source of pride. Assurance of his call is a source of humility, not a source of pride. And when we allow it to become a source of pride, that is so, so dangerous. Because once we let pride in, that other stuff starts to fade too. The confidence that we talked about, the confidence fades. Because when you're prideful, you are constantly comparing yourself to everybody, constantly feeling like you're not good enough. And the truth is, you're not. You aren't good enough. And when you start to gauge your ability to do certain things based on your abilities rather than what God can do, that spiritual confidence is going to begin to fade. The ability to persevere will go away when you face struggle, when you face hardship, when you have to face any sort of apprehension. Those difficult seasons and that apprehension will destroy you because you will no longer have the ability to persevere. The authority that God gave you, he's definitely going to rip that away, and it's going to take a lot to get it back. And so we have to have an assurance in his call, just like Lord talked about. We have to have an assurance in his call. And whatever God builds through us, we have to protect it and make sure that it remains a source of humility and not a source of pride.